Part 1, The Guest. Chapter 1, The City of Dragor. What shapes humanity's fate? Some unseen force or a law, like the hand of God hovering above the world. At the very least, one truth remains. A man has no control even over his own will. Kentaro Miura, Berserk. The cold penetrated deeper and deeper. It seemed like the wind was seeping into the very bones. Gloomy, heavy clouds completely covered the sky and swallowed the bright disk of the moon. Small raindrops covered his face and streamed down his cheeks like tears. The bewildered traveler stood on the platform, watching as the locomotive, releasing plumes of steam, vanished into the distance along the rails. A cry of pain and suffering broke free. He grabbed his head with his hands and fell to his knees. Fear, like scorching lava, enveloped his body, and flames mercilessly penetrated his memory. His knowledge was burning away. Desperately, he tried to save fragments of the past and not lose himself in the abyss of time, but only panic and helplessness clung to the extinguished embers of memories. All attempts to preserve even a fraction of former images proved futile. He no longer remembered anything about himself. Only, looking around in confusion, realized how alien this place was. He was greeted by a station hollow with emptiness and stone statues of lifeless gargoyles, and the city, plunged into foggy gloom, with a creaking gate in the wind, beckoned him deeper into the streets. Overcoming the trembling in his legs, he rose and somehow, mechanically moved forward from the spot. It seemed everything was closing in around him, as if someone was pushing from behind. Yellow, lifeless lanterns dimly reflected in the dirty, wet cobblestones, and the slick air mixed with hopelessness and death tickled his nostrils, seeping into his lungs. Lights were on in the houses, and shadows flickered in the windows on tightly drawn curtains, but there was no one around. Fate had played a cruel joke on him. Torn memories, an exhausted body, and a complete loss in space-time. How long had he been walking without support and direction? It was as if he had fallen into a crack of the past, and his own familiar world existed somewhere far away in a parallel universe. No new buildings, no automobiles, no other machines that could somehow testify to the passage of eras and their changes. His thoughts flew like a whirlwind, yet his sanity remained with him. The cool air, entering his lungs, stirred him a little, creating a sense of aliveness and an illusion of relief, but nothing more. More than once he wanted to approach and knock on some door, but he doubted. Would they take him for a madman? He was alone in this unfamiliar place, and this only intensified his sense of helplessness and despair. But with each new step, he continued to hope that in a single moment, stepping out of the labyrinth of oblivion, everything would become as before. At last, a silhouette appeared ahead, painfully familiar, like a beacon, or perhaps he only imagined it. Making his way through the fog, he hurried. His heart was beating faster in hope of finding answers, or at least some help. He raised his eyes to see the face of the one who stood beside him. But even the old man standing before him seemed like an echo of the past, wrinkled all over and dried up like a splinter. The only place on his years-eaten body that radiated liveliness and energy were his eyes, bright blue and a little mad. In appearance, he resembled more a little man who had run away from the pages of a fairy tale. Short trousers, mismatched colorful socks peeking out from under the edges of worn shoes, a knitted baggy sweater, and a pocket watch on a chain in a special leather-attached pouch instead of a belt. "Good time of day?" The old man ran up to him, almost skipping, and vigorously shook his hand. He examined him closely and fussed restlessly around the newly arrived guest. "I was already starting to worry, but praise be to the heavens." "Good day," the traveler mumbled indistinctly. He looked in confusion at the strange old man, whose behavior resembled more a small intrusive dog that spun around one's feet, happy about every passerby. "Do you know me? Please say that you do." A timid but living hope sounded in his words. "No, we are not acquainted," the old man rattled off, "but I was told that you would arrive." "What?" The traveler's face twisted. "Who?" He understood nothing. His mind completely rejected what was happening. Is this someone's cruel joke? Was I drugged? His vision swam slightly and his body swayed, whether from exhaustion or from an excess of feelings. "No, this is not the effect of substances. Your memories are the price for being in this city. but I don't feel like I'm supposed to be here." "Really?" The old man looked at the guest closely, studying him. "This city draws in only those whom the rest of the world has rejected, and those who desperately need it. But I don't even know who I am, and what kind of city is this?" the traveler faltered. "Oh, my dear friend, this place is called Dragor. And as for who you are, soon you will tell me yourself. No one forgets their own name. The only thing you will have to accept is that for some time this place will become your home." The sign, Dandelion Inn Pub, swayed above the doorway, into which the old man almost instantly slipped. "Come inside quickly. It's not safe outside now," he shouted on the move. The odd stranger was his only chance to learn at least something, and so the traveler almost instantly followed him. A small hall with strange sources of light and burning candles in holders turned out to be surprisingly crowded. On the stone floor, covered with a thick layer of dirt, stood wooden tables cluttered with mugs of mead, beer, and other drinks that intoxicated the soul and cheered the heart. And in the air there was a bitter smell of tobacco that burst from the throats of the lodgers, along with lies and tales. The noise suddenly ceased, and everyone began to look around, examining the guest intently. An outsider? Could it be that it will all start again? Voices came from different corners. Some tried to speak in whispers, while others did not hide their displeasure at all. "Get out of here if you value your life at least a little," and others. A slightly drunk woman ran out of the crowd, grabbed the traveler by the collar, and began to shake him. "That's enough. You know we don't choose our guests or the time of their arrival," the old man intervened and quickly cut himself short. "I know," the woman muttered, and her fingers slipped from the guest's jacket. She looked the traveler straight in the eyes and almost instantly rushed out of the room. "Stop making noise for no reason. No need to put on a show here." The old man snorted and beckoned the traveler to follow him. They walked through dark corridors that, like small labyrinths intertwining with each other, led them farther and farther away from the crowd. It seemed to the traveler that a little more, and he would be completely disoriented, when suddenly a bright light blinded him. Large crystal spheres illuminated a marble staircase, on which stood stone statues of women, tirelessly supporting the vaults with their fragile shoulders. The old man climbed upward without stopping, but the guest halted. A strange feeling overcame him. He could not understand why, with absolute childlike naivety and trust, he was following an elderly man he barely knew. Moreover, inside there was a wild certainty of the goodness of his intentions. In this small man there was indeed a sense of sincerity and a desire to help. His years-eaten body hid a beautiful soul that was radically different from the atmosphere of the city and its inhabitants. He did not understand how he should perceive the visitors of the pub, for drunken people are more honest and bold than sober ones, who certainly tell the truth less often, but he knew for sure that if he was to go, then he should go to the end. Casting aside all thoughts and doubts, he quickly caught up with his guide and, turning the corner, found himself at a wooden door. "Oh, I completely forgot myself. I am Edgar Sekus and the owner of the Dandelion." The old man once again grabbed the guest's hand and began to shake it. "And He wanted to say something in response, but he could not. His memory had completely sealed off his past. He could not remember anything, neither the path he had traveled nor the reasons that had brought him to this city. There was a dense fog in his head, and it seemed there was not even a hint of a clearing in it, when suddenly the name slipped from his lips on its own. Eric Grine. You see, not everything is forgotten. After all, a name, more than anything else, preserves character, the old man smiled. That's why it is always remembered. The guest mechanically slipped his hands into his clothes and checked his pockets for any contents. Why he had not done this earlier, he had no idea, and there was little point in it. They were empty. "What I can say with certainty is my inability to pay for lodging," Eric said, embarrassed. "Well then," the old man did not get upset, handing him a key. "Let's pretend you are my relative, and then who knows, you might even come in handy." Sekus smirked and quickly left. Perhaps he only convinced himself of it, but Eric Grine, stepping over the threshold of the hotel room, for the first time breathed with relief. It seemed this evening had exhausted all possible surprises and troubles. Thoughts about what awaited him next, and how his life would now unfold, were gradually evaporating from his head. Being at the bottom of emotional decline, he understood that even living a completely normal life, it is not easy to find one's own path, and for those who are lost in the abyss of time, this task becomes almost impossible. Intrusive rays of sunlight pierced through the heavy curtains, and the chirping of early birds announced the beginning of a new day. Outside, everything was waking up, the town filled with new rustles and enthusiasm. The postman, as always, tried to dodge an annoying dog and an old woman. "Fifi, get him! Get him!" she fumed, waving her stick. As always, she was unlucky, and because of her poodle, the morning newspaper landed in the bushes. "I'm old, and no respect at all," shuffling her feet. She tried to reach that ill-fated bundle. In the mind of this elderly lady settled the thought that the whole world had turned against her, and especially the boy, who every morning tried to deliver the fresh news on time. The wheels of the bicycle rolled along the road. The design of this simple means of transport was, to put it mildly, strange. At first glance, a three-wheeled one, but surprisingly maneuverable and fast. With slow pedaling, it easily cut through the air and crossed many streets in a matter of minutes. Traffic on the roads was calm. Despite the variety of transport, including horses, everything was organized clearly. Everyone had their own lane and their own rules. Under the bright rays of the sun, the city did not seem gloomy, but rather strangely marvelous. At first glance, everything here spoke of different eras of past years, but with a mixture of completely unusual technologies, not natural in their essence, yet closely interacting with its elements, with light, air, trees, water, and its other manifestations. Everything around resembled a large anthill where everyone was busy with something. Shops, various establishments, gates, windows, doors, jars of fragrant coffee were opening, and everything that could and should open at this hour. The air held a pleasant aroma of food and the intoxicating smell of concoctions that Sikas carefully stirred. He was in anticipation of new events, because this day was no longer like the others. Another soul had appeared here, one that was now in the world of dreams. Eric Grind tossed from side to side, wrapped in a blanket. He dreamed of a labyrinth under a night sky from which there was no way out, a room filled with dark figures with red eyes, a strange woman, many other things, all in fragments without meaning, end, or beginning. He felt sick and began to feel nauseous. He fell off the bed, burying his nose into the carpet. With great effort, he gathered his strength and tried to stand, but his body, wrapped in incredible heaviness, did not want to obey or yield. Even moving his fingers became a problem. Eric made an indistinct sound. He had to make quite an effort to climb back onto his bed and try to sit. No dream had ever thrown him off balance so much. Complete chaos reigned in his head, and blurred images continued to appear before his eyes. He was terribly thirsty. Staggering around the room, he began to look for a jug of water. "I've really fallen apart," Eric muttered awkwardly under his breath. Coming to himself a little, he flung open the curtains on the windows. The sun was only beginning to break through the horizon, and the streets were already filled with lively movement. The light burst into his chambers in an instant and illuminated the hotel room, quite cozy, with 2 rooms. The opening from the bedroom led into a space resembling a living room with a fireplace, a soft velvet-covered sofa, and a long bookshelf. The walls were decorated with oil paintings, the same castle depicted from different angles and in different scales. The painting seemed familiar and somehow especially drew the lodger in, evoking a beckoning desire to touch it with his own fingers. Everything here resembled royal chambers, which made his memory shudder. Somewhere deep inside, he knew that he had once lived in abundance, but, unfortunately, not a single clear memory came to his mind. Trying to drive away the nightmare, he took a bath and only then left his room. In his head spun more than a dozen questions that he longed to ask Edgar Sikas, and so he wanted to meet him as quickly as possible. In the pub, it was surprisingly empty and bright. The tables polished to a shine, and the air held the scent of flowers and pleasant freshness. Puffing and grinding his teeth, Sikas came out from behind the counter. He was clearly displeased about something. That damned Ignatius again. How long can this go on? Excuse me, what? Eric froze in confusion. Good morning. Ah, you're up early? The old man turned around. Well, a certain ministerial turkey should show up any minute now. A ministerial turkey, you say? A tall, thin man appeared from behind the door, with hair dark as pitch and a gaze sharp as needles. At the tip of his nose hung small, round glasses, matching his suit and shoes, polished to a shine. Such foul language, Sikas, though I expected nothing else from you. You already know the wives have been complaining again. Looking over his glasses, the official glanced at Eric, who silently sat down at the table. And I see we do indeed have a newcomer? As you can see, and it seems like you lot can't wait over there. Edgar muttered a phrase incomprehensible to the guest, pouring coffee into cups. Let me note, there is nothing illegal in what I do. I don't drag anyone into my pub by force, and you know that. And if the wives don't like that their husbands come here at night, then they should keep a better eye on them, nag less, and show a bit of affection. Maybe then they wouldn't run away. A faint smile appeared on Eric Grind's face, though with effort he immediately tried to suppress it. Careful, or I might just shut you down, Ignatius raged. As you wish, but then you'll have to find another place to get your tincture, the old man smirked, and it became his triumph. He knew perfectly well that no one else around was capable of making the pain-relieving and calming concoction that kept the official's thoughts from slipping into madness. So be it, the man said, handing over a 10, and slipped a small vial with ruby liquid, given by Sikas in exchange for the money, into his inner pocket. I'll try to think of something. Those foolish women are always dissatisfied with something. It will all be settled. He paused a little and continued. Ah, yes, almost forgot. Tell the newcomer about our little laws, or it will end badly. Ignatius warned, leaving the pub. What is this about? Eric frowned. And to be honest, that's not the only question on my tongue. I don't want to seem rude, but I really remember almost nothing, though that doesn't mean I understand nothing. I can say with certainty, I am in this city for the first time, and moreover, this place is radically different from where I lived before. You are right about that, the old man nodded. But listen. Perhaps what I am about to tell you will be hard to understand, but you must, Edgar sighed, gathering his thoughts. In short, Dragor chooses its own guests. No one appears here by chance, only those who need this place. Though it also happens that travelers who wander here remember nothing at all, neither the road nor what guided them when they left their old life, and that only means the city itself called them. It sounds more than strange, but there's nothing to oppose it with. Eric tried to take the old man's words as seriously as possible, but it was hard to believe. In his memory, everything seemed blurred, and his last clear recollections were of a desire to change everything to the core. You can doubt the truth of what I said. That's your business. Edgar seemed to catch the guest's thoughts, and his voice grew rougher. But you will still have to take something into account, namely the main rule. Follow it if you want to live calmly in our world. In Dragor, a curfew is imposed after sunset, and going outside at night is strictly forbidden. And know this, for disobedience, the guilty are sent behind bars, a place you'd better not end up in. And now, excuse me, I must leave you. Hurriedly clearing the cups, the old man headed for the door. I have a lot to do. Eric did not manage to stop the old man, nor even say a word after him before he disappeared from sight. He had no other choice but to remain alone with a plate filled with food. Besides, the smell of mushroom omelet beckoned his nose, and his stomach growled in a wild spasm from mad hunger. Even though his thoughts continued to agitate his mind, weighing down his consciousness, he simply could not restrain himself and not pounce on the food. What he had heard created a slight unease, but stuffing his mouth, Eric mechanically turned and looked around. On one of the walls hung large antique clocks, witnesses of lived days and fates, and yet no more than a century ago they had been a luxury item, and people were only learning to manage their time, a special philosophical category, a kind of soul of things. He watched the pendulum swinging from side to side, and could not understand why everything was so fleeting, and why a person cannot control his life and his future. After all, in truth, Everything happens exactly when it must happen, not a fraction of a second earlier, and not a fraction of a second later. In an instant, confusion swallowed the guest. It seemed that only now he had the right to turn the following events in any direction. But perhaps he was not even capable of that, since a person has no power even over his own thoughts, let alone his words or actions. For many things are done as if by the direction of some invisible hand. How can one think that the Creator gave us a choice if we live by the will of accidents? Would it be that he, Eric Grein, would have to search for himself in this strange city and learn to perceive this world from the beginning? Breakfast calmed his stomach, but not his soul. He was still tormented by the nightmare of that night. His body needed a walk, and his mind needed fresh air. He decided to distract himself a little and walk around the area. On the territory of the dandelion, there was a large, beautiful garden with fruit trees and flowering shrubs, which led him to the thought of wandering a little barefoot on the warm, damp grass, breathing in the scent drifting in the air. He was already far enough from the place where his feet had first touched the ground when he saw a small slope down which a stream flowed, and at its foot stood a weeping sakura, its branches lowered. It was as if it had forgotten what spring was and had plunged into blooming in summer. Its delicate pink petals danced in the air and fell down. The proud, majestic tree, wrapped in a cloud, seemed to fear and await a gust of wind to shower the ground with a snow of petals. The day turned out to be surprisingly sultry. In search of shelter from the poisonous sun, Eric moved into the shade and lay down. He had barely closed his eyes when suddenly the ground began to tremble, and walls rose before him. Streams of blood seeped through the stones and ran downward. A red puddle formed at his feet, and from afar came desperate screams that grew louder. It seemed that from this Eric himself was ready to scream. He covered his eyes with his hands, and his consciousness groaned. It's only a dream, but nothing disappeared. He tried to get up, but could not. Dozens of hands held him, stretching from beneath the ground and covering his body like tentacles. His heart clenched and reality cracked. All his muscles tensed and a current ran through them. He jerked in convulsions and came to himself. There was nothing around anymore. The vision had left him. Eric breathed heavily and his shirt was soaked with sweat. He turned his head in different directions and tried to understand what had happened to him, but nothing strange was happening anymore. Only the sky had grown dim and the sun was running toward the horizon. Around him, he no longer felt the intoxicating scent, and the air carried a smell of rot and dampness. How many hours had passed since he had wandered here? He did not know. The brightest flowers had taken on some gray and dull color. He felt completely uneasy. He grabbed his head with his hands and got to his feet. More than anything, Eric wanted to be in a crowded place, with a cup of tea or coffee in his hand, and so he quickly walked away. How pleasant it was to see a crowd at the entrance to the pub. People again began to whisper and look around. Only fragments of phrases reached him. Why is he here? Now we can expect the worst. Little by little, paranoia began to take hold of Eric. He imagined ill-wishers everywhere. In a single day in Dragor, thoughts had settled in his head that every second person wished him harm. A living corpse, a dwarf in the crowd snickered maliciously. He ignored it and, without turning around, entered the dandelion. Inside it was calm and relatively quiet. A few people sipping beer were talking among themselves. He sat at the bar counter and froze, waiting for Sikas. "Quite kind people you have," Eric said ironically to the old man, who soon set a mug of a hoppy drink before him. "If you want to stay here for some time, you should learn to let many words pass by your ears," the old man advised. "They are like that because they know things you don't, and it's better that way. Curiosity has ruined many here." "Is it really that terrible?" Eric asked mechanically. He no longer had the strength for emotions, and he did not even hope his words would be taken seriously. "Exactly." The old man turned and grew somber. "But no one understands the full seriousness, and if they do, they keep silent. Most think it's just a legend created to instill fear because frightened townsfolk are much easier to control." Sikas leaned closer to the guest and whispered, "Listen, don't ask questions and don't try to understand what is happening in this city. Just start a new life here, and perhaps one day your past will return. I'm not asking you for money or anything in return. You can live here until you adapt, but I beg you, do not uncover secrets or open doors that are closed to you." "How can I?" Eric tried to object, but the old man ignored him. "What legend are you talking about?" Little by little, the people who had been standing outside began to drift inside and take the free seats. Strangely enough, the conversation between the old man and the newcomer had long ceased to be private, as the number of people kept growing, and the chairs at the counter quickly filled. Anyone whose thoughts were not wandering somewhere far away or absorbed in conversation could hear them. There were few women, but they were present. Their heads were covered with simple hats, and their loose clothing made them almost invisible among the crowd of men. A legend? Rather events. Events that took place long before our time. A plump, middle-aged woman in a checkered suit and with a pleasant voice interjected. Though it seems they affected some directly, the woman smiled slyly and looked intently at Sikas. Eric recognized her. It was the same lady who had tried to drive him away the night before, though this time she gave the impression of a pleasant person. Her words came out calmly, almost gently, from small, plump lips edged with foam from the drink standing by her hand. "Oh, Maria, you are, as always, too sincere and direct," the old man cut in. "You can never keep silent," Sikas laughed, speaking to the woman like an old friend. Maria studied the guest intently for a while, and then suddenly addressed him. "You do believe in something supernatural, don't you?" The question caught Eric off guard. It seemed he himself, somewhere deep inside, had asked himself the same thing more than once. How could one believe in something that cannot be seen, heard, or felt, although lately even his own senses had begun to fail him? It's hard to speak about something you don't know for certain, but I do not deny it, because a person has learned to understand only what he wants. Sometimes we do not notice the most ordinary events happening right under our noses. "Oh, and there is truth in your words." Edgar did not want the conversation between Maria and the guest to happen, but he did not interfere and simply smiled. He very much liked the guest's answer. Perhaps even he, from the depth of years, would not have said it better. Lately, Eric Grein had lost his connection with his past life and could not understand what was happening with real time and with himself. Since arriving in this city, he had been surrounded by mysteries and strangeness. It even began to seem to him that he was slowly going mad. Everything diverged so much from his understanding of the normal world and from the fragments of knowledge that still remained in the distant corners of his memory. He needed at least some explanations, not just hints and threats coming from different people. "I don't know whether my small story can explain anything to you, but I will try." Maria's voice dropped to a whisper. "Just understand, it is not customary here to speak of such things out loud." Every resident of Dragor knew a great deal about what the woman was about to tell, but few dared even to mention it, and so the people standing around fell silent, trying not to miss a single word. "You have probably heard of such creatures as vampires, haven't you? There are tales about them in the folklore of many peoples." Maria moved almost right up to Eric, but then suddenly leaned back against the chair, waiting for his reaction. "Maybe, but I can't say I thought of them as something real," he answered. "Vampires are the dead who leave their graves at night and suck people's blood or something like that." "Oh yes, that is exactly what most think," Maria interrupted Eric. "But that is far from the truth. In reality, vampires are a very ancient race of unusual beings, eternal but not immortal, not alive, yet not dead. People long ago lost knowledge of the true nature of vampires, but they never lost knowledge about us, and they have always been keepers of secrets and mysteries absorbed from the blood of the living. And unfortunately, all I can tell you is only speculation, legends, and rumors, and a little bit of truth." Maria's face became completely joyless and distant. "It is said that vampires appeared at the very beginning of all life on Earth and became among the first creators of society. They adapted easily, so it was not difficult for them to live in any environment and with any beings. Vampires were always intelligent, strong, and truly powerful, but they had one small weakness." The storyteller quickly looked around and continued. "Sunlight. and it was precisely this trait that forced them to hide underground. They had to seek shelter every day, and so in their time they built 2 dwellings for themselves. An underground city for peaceful existence and sleep during the day, going deep into the depths of Dragor, and a Saju castle for their night social life, which still rises on one of the hills of the city. It is this place that absorbed fears, blood, and the memory of events, whose shadows still give their commands from the darkness. The density of the population in ancient times did not pose a threat to the vampires, but times changed, and with each decade, the number of people increased. There was no longer a single part of the earth where a human foot had not stepped, and as you know from history, a wave of wars and revolutions swept across this world. The Principality of Dragoria was no exception, repeatedly coming under attack from different sides and increasingly finding itself at the center of large-scale battles. Although the Red Kin tried to stay away from worldly affairs, it still suffered losses until it eventually left its walls and dissolved into the masses across different continents for many centuries. And everything would have been fine if not for the events of a century ago. They returned with a thirst for revenge and a desire to reclaim their homeland. From that moment, strange and terrible things began to happen. Dragor turned into a domain of vampires, and people became food for them. Cruel creatures lived here, who were excellent hunters and merciless predators. Few dared to oppose them. Only some, with burning hearts and strong spirit, challenged them and continued the struggle for life. Not a single day passed without tears and grief, without sweat and blood. Many townspeople, even without being bearers of rotten immortal blood, in striving to protect their loved ones, took the side of this evil and themselves turned into its likeness. Chaos and panic reigned, sweeping through the area and nurturing great evil. During that dark period, thousands of people paid with their lives. Months and years passed until a glimmer appeared in the pitch darkness. By joining forces, the enlightened minds of that time, the esoteric practitioners of these lands, imprisoned all who had taken the bloody path of wrongdoing in a stone city, now called a Saju castle. And to this day, after sunset, some prisoners of this place can come out and wander through our streets like ghosts. But they are capable not only of spreading fear, but also of consuming souls, leaving behind only a shell that carries out their commands, and of calling new inhabitants from other lands. This happens for only one reason: they want to bring back the former times. Having finished her story, gloom froze in the woman's eyes. That is all. Now it is for you to decide how to take my words. I have no factual evidence of their truth. If only the walls of Dragor could speak, then only they could tell us the truth. People in the pub exchanged glances and whispered. It seemed even in the farthest corners of the room they knew what was being talked about. "Well, that's quite a pile of nonsense," a man standing aside interjected. "These are just rumors spread as a precaution. No need to believe every horror story. So stop talking such nonsense." "Well then, our authorities, crude, dishonorable, and totalitarian," Maria smiled slyly. "It wouldn't hurt to hang them all, or better yet, impale them. Isn't that right, Colonel Ignatius? And I think you've started to miss that place behind bars you were just released from?" He flared up. "I'll gladly go back there," Maria snapped, "but only after you fulfill my wish." Eric Grine, unable to hold back, smirked, but no one paid him any attention. Those present had long forgotten about him and how it had all begun. The drink had gone to the heads of those arguing. Noise and complete chaos reigned around. People tried to shout over one another. And the colonel was a fan of drinking at the Dandelion. Though he did not particularly like the visitors of this establishment, today was one of those 2 days of the week set aside for a quart of beer and discussions. Lately, it had become his habit. Soon, the Dandelion sank back into its usual atmosphere, and so no one even noticed how Eric rose from his chair and went out the door. He was thoroughly tired of everything he had heard and seen that day. His consciousness continued to struggle for normality, although his confidence in the rational order of things had been quite shaken. The drink slightly clouded his mind, but in no way erased the residue in his soul that had accumulated in such a short time in Dragor, and as he walked up the stairs to his room, he repeatedly recalled the story he had heard from the woman. He did not know whether to take everything seriously or to treat it more simply, as inventions and rumors. That way his mind would not be bothered by questions he would not be able to answer anyway. Maybe he really should follow Sikas' advice, try to build a new life here and stop digging into himself. Otherwise, he was not far from madness. His dreams and visions, there was something supernatural in them.